It is my distinct honor to be here today to welcome a woman who has actually seen our world from another world, a vantage point that offers her a unique perspective on the global challenges that we all face. An astronaut, a scientist, a musician, a mother, Dr. Cady Coleman was originally educated at MIT and the University of Massachusetts. She's a polymer chemist. Cady has flown twice on the space shuttle. She lived for almost 6 months on the International Space Station. And there she served as the lead of science and robotics officer for expeditions 26 and 27. On the ground, Cady was also a lead astronaut for supply ships, and she was NASA's chief of robotics. Not bad. In her final years with NASA, Cady took on another key role. She led open innovation and public-private partnership efforts for NASA's Chief Technology Officer. She was working with Launch.org and others to try to inspire a collaborative action to try to address some of our global sustainability challenges. This work is what actually brought her to us today. She's now retired from NASA. She devotes her time to furthering collaborative action and leadership to support a sustainable world. She actually, in her heart and in her mind, envisions a future where people from all over the world can come together to try to solve some of these global challenges. Her experience and this perspective that she brings us today, we hope, will inspire you. It's certainly inspired me to speak with her even prior to this event, and it is my real pleasure to welcome Dr. Cady Coleman.
Thank you so much. Okay, we'll see you in just a few minutes. Hello, I'm so happy to be here, but I'd like to talk about why we're here. Why are you here? And why am I here? Now, if you're in this audience here in Vancouver, or if you're in Toronto and you're watching, or maybe you're watching the film of this later on because it'll be on the web, I think that you're here because you have or you seek a perspective about how we can live more sustainably on our planet. And that's why I'm here as well, because I think that whether you have a perspective that you know you need to share, or whether you come to a place where you know you're going to find more perspective than when you came, I think that that's what all of us are really here for. And as Catherine so nicely said during the introduction, I lived for almost 6 months up on the International Space Station. And here's a picture actually that you'll only see in one way. This is the only time this picture was taken, was when my Soyuz, the one that the three of us were in, we were leaving the International Space Station. And it's the only time we've ever undocked from the space station while a space shuttle, one of the last ones, was still present. And so you see on the left-hand side, you'll see that space shuttle attached to that giant, magnificent International Space Station built in large part with that Canadian robotic arm. There's only one time that you'll see pictures, or only one time that pictures like that were taken, and that's when we undocked. So it's always a very special memory for me, and I wanted to share my perspective of what it's like to live so far away and yet so close, and have just a perspective from looking down and both seeing in detail and also seeing a larger picture of what we're doing down here. But then I remembered that I'm coming to the Zero Waste Conference, and I thought we should start at the Zero Waste place on the International Space Station. Now, and plus, when you go home, I don't see a lot of kids here, but when you go home, they're going to want to know about this, right? And so in a sort of a joking way, but actually in a serious way, and note that I'm using chocolate-covered candies to demonstrate. I did actually make this demonstration video with granola bars at one point. It just didn't look right. But I think that this is the place where we dispose of waste on our space station, and it's a great mystery to many, and also a source of kind of apprehension, because boy, waste is so messy, and what happens if we do it wrong? And actually, those are real problems up on the space station. And at the same time, it's so important to do it right that we have to talk about those things, as a crew. And like the minute something goes wrong with the toilet, it is like a national emergency or an international emergency, so to speak. But as you can see here, I'll just explain the physics quickly, and that is that you're looking at what looks like the commode part of our toilet, and that is where we have a little plastic bag sort of stretched over the mouth there, And then you see the little red tab on the back there. The little bag there has holes on the bottom. Not intuitive for the place that we're going to put everything yucky. Like the paper and everything is all going to go in there. And as you can see right here, it doesn't really have a choice. It's being sort of pulled in through the magic of engineering. We've got a vacuum there. Do not try this at home. But we've got a vacuum system, and it's actually pulling all the waste into that bag. And even though there's holes in the bottom which allow that breeze to happen, it doesn't actually go through. It's not a strong breeze. And when we're all done, we pull up on that red tab, the top closes, and then we push that bag down through like sort of two levers. It never comes back up again. We never see it again. When that can is full, we actually put a lid on it, and it goes into one of our trash ships. And so for the International Space Station, for right now, we actually do not recycle our solid waste, but it is on the list and very high on the list, partly because when we try to go to Mars, we're going to need that solid waste. Now, as for liquid waste, first of all, I will tell you that going to the bathroom on the International Space Station is easier than any camping trip you have ever been on. Everyone can do it right side up, upside down if we're talking about pee. In my family, we talk about pee. And again, it's that system of a vacuum, having everything go in the place it needs to go. Now, when I tell this story to school kids, they're a little distressed. And that's because I tell them all that pee goes right down that hose into a tank. It goes through all sorts of filters. It comes out the other end, and we drink it that day. And the way we like to say it is that we're just drinking yesterday's coffee today. And the worst part of it for the kids is to realize is that's what we do down here, right? That's what we do down here on the Earth. And so I'd like to share a perspective of how we think about trying to reuse everything, and also in a zero waste, a circular economy kind of way, we're thinking about how do we make sure that we don't bring too much up to begin with, or that we design things to be reused and repurposed, but also thinking very carefully about how they start off their life. So here's the International Space Station. This is about 4 minutes long, this little video. And it just shows a little bit about getting ready. I wanted you to understand a little bit about what it means to leave our planet and go on a journey ready to do very important work up on the space station. And that work that we do, this is our big spacewalk suits, but now it's launch night, and we're getting ready to actually say goodbye to our families. We're launching from Russia in the Russian Soyuz, and I'm waving to my son, who was 10 at the time, and my husband. He's a glass artist in Massachusetts. And we're walking out. We're a little bit nervous, as you'll see. We promised small steps and slowly, and we all forgot. I literally ran to the launch pad. And then we're climbing into the scariest elevator that you've ever seen, into a really solid and great rocket. And it takes us in that rocket from this moment on about 8.5 minutes to go to space. And I show you these things because I want you to understand that actually going to space really makes some things really quite easy for us, because life is so different up there that it helps us really understand that there are so many possibilities of doing things different ways that we haven't even considered. This is us up on that space station right before Christmas. This is my favorite scene of the whole movie, even though you see my back half. And that is because this is what it's like to live in space without a lot of gravity, where we fly from place to place. Supply ships arrive flying at 17,500 miles an hour alongside us. They pull up alongside. I was the second person to operate the beautiful Canadarm2 to capture that supply ship. Now it happens almost every week, or at least a few times a month, to have supply ships come up. But it was a very unusual occurrence back then, and I was very proud of the work that I did with our fellow International Space Station partners. You can actually see the Canadian robotic arm in almost every photo, as you see as we'll go along here. So a lot of supply ships coming up and down, and every one of them filled with things that are so carefully considered. What are we bringing? Will it be useful? When is it needed? Because really, keeping track of space on that space station is one of the hardest things. Here you see the space shuttle coming up. They're bringing a large part of the space station up. That is a silver thing in the bottom there. It is a giant closet module filled with equipment. Now think about this. When it launches on that space shuttle, I mean, it's going to be a lot of vibration, and so everything has to be packed really well. The bane of our existence up on that space station is the foam and packing material, that all the precious things that have to be so preciously packed are packed in. What do we do with it now? And it's a problem. I always notice the Canadian robotic arm, as I said, front and center in almost every photo there. And so thinking about what we've brought up with us, for the way to Mars, we're looking at ways, how do we make packing material into something that when we get to Mars, we actually can use it to build our dwellings, to actually maybe put in the walls of our cabins, even on the way to Mars, to be able to protect us from radiation. So how can we be thinking in advance of how to repurpose these things? Because you have to do it way early. And you have to do it way earlier than the system that you're working within can accept that idea. And that's where I think you and I have a lot in common. Now, some things are easier for me, but I like you to look here and just see how much stuff we have up there and what happens when we send something that isn't useful. It's really not helpful. In order to get to, if you have too many things up there, in order to get to the things you need, you actually have to unpack, and then things come out, and then you lose things. Here's just the place that we gather as a team, a really important place. And a little bit about experiments. So let's quickly just look at some of the possibilities up there. And it's about the research that we're doing. I mean, this is why we have possibilities. And I know it's fun to look at gummy bears, but let me just show you that one more time there. Let's see. It's really fun to look at gummy bears, but it really just shows you in this little drop of water going back and forth here, we're getting to find out what do liquids really want to do. And that's all about how to understand how to go to space, how to know how much gas we have on the way to Mars, but it's also all about Earth, understanding how to process liquids differently in waste, in sewage, in oil recovery. Up in space, we get to see flames be circles, like you just saw, and it gives us a possibility of making our measurements over a much longer time. Measurements that we might make about combustion down here on the Earth in less than a second, we get to make over 30 or 40 seconds. And so it's really, really powerful for us to be able to have a different lens into the process. I mean, things aren't really burning any differently, but we have a different way to examine them, a different way to see them, a different way to look at growing plants in space, for example. We need to give them just enough nutrients and light and energy as they need, and at the same time, those things are not unlimited for us on the space station or on our way to Mars or when we get to Mars. And so we have to be looking with a new lens, taking a new kind of look, and I think that is what you are here to do today, and that most of you have been doing in your work for a long time. And a conference like this where you gather everyone into this place and show them the kinds of things that you're each talking about, this is where powerful things can happen, and I'm just so pleased to be a part of it. We do a lot of research up there on the human body. I'm just going to show you a little bit about sort of living in space and the possibilities of doing that. Let me just go back. Let's see. Let's see if this is going to go. There we go. One of the things I like to show people is that we're real people, and the fact that we're real people, and we all have things that are important to us. All of you are like that too. And you can use those things that are interesting to help people understand that you as a person are attacking some really hard work, and you're just like them, and that's why you need them on your team. When I was up there, I did some music, and similar to your wonderful Chris Hadfield, Chris and I have played music together for 20-something years. This is Ian Anderson of the band Jethro Tull. Now, in order to do this collaboration, this partnership, I didn't know him. And it was more, I said, I have an opportunity, I think it's important, and I'd like to do this together. And can we do a duet between Earth and space? And in fact, Ian, in this duet, he comes from the band Jethro Tull, which many of you might have heard of, and it was important to me that he brought the flute to rock music. He was playing this concert in Russia on the 50th anniversary of human spaceflight, And
Thanks,
I
Colonel
myself
Catherine
was up
Coleman
on the
and the
space station.
International Space Station.
And so we did this partnership together. In order to do that, well, one of us had to be brave. I want to say that was me. And one of us had to be open. And I want to say that was him. And that's our job today when we gather together to do some really hard things. And I think working as that kind of team, it has a lot of similarities to being a band on the road. If you notice the nice guy in the middle with the light blue shirt there, that's your wonderful Chris Hadfield, who through his work on the space station, I will say changed the image that Canada has of what we do in space, why we do it in space, and why it's important forever. I mean, I would say in Canada, there's probably not anyone I can find who doesn't know that there's a space station up there. And it's not true in the States. And it's partly because Chris was open and he was brave and he put himself out there and he shared in a way that was very visible and very inclusive. And he made a difference in Canada's perception and the world's perception of that space station. I mean, I want to talk about perspective in the last, say about 10 minutes that I have left here. And so here's our space station. It's kind of small when you look at it. I mean, it's actually large. You saw a lot of flying through. It's like 10 train cars all stuck together in a row. And so it's actually quite big for us living up there, but it's pretty small in reference to the planet. It's actually closer to the planet than you think and maybe further away. And we can see things from a different perspective. And here is you hate to say, this is a beautiful picture. It's a beautiful hurricane, but under that weather, we know that devastation is occurring as we speak. And so it's a perspective that we have that's both informative and also makes us think really quite a bit about let's see, there we go. Thank you. And so it's a beautiful view. This is Italy, indeed, shaped like a boot. And I think it's something special about showing home. I'm from New England. I'm from Massachusetts. One of the guys that I flew with had this really great way of sharing that. And he said we looked down at Massachusetts at the very same time, our very first time from space, looked down, saw the place that we come from, and he said, "Oh my gosh, it looks just like the map." So it's a special view. And it looks different every day, every hour. I never got tired of the view. This is kind of a wistful look where we're going, 17,500 miles an hour. When I see it out the windows from our cupola, I see it in the distance, and then I'm there, and then I turn around, and it's going away. So it's a very, very special, emotional kind of view, especially when it's home. This is one of Chris Hadfield's pictures of Vancouver. So let's talk about those teams here at the end and what I bring maybe from a team perspective. I mean, this is a picture of our crew, and we're all really excited about going to space. We don't all look excited, do we? But that's what I had to learn, is that in this picture, whether people are smiling or not smiling, it is actually a picture about all of us ready to go to space. And I needed to learn that. We have an international space station, and I needed to learn that about some of my Russian colleagues, that they had different ways of looking at that. So it's all a matter of perspective. I showed you all those pictures. They're taken from this cupola right here, up on the space station. When you see that kind of view, I have a feeling I must be up and looking down. But really, if this is us and there's the Earth, we must be actually down and looking down. So it's kind of a different perspective. So if you can, in working together, try to look at things a different way. In this picture, I don't know if you can quite see me. I mean, I'm there, but I'm just not in a place you're used to finding me up there on the ceiling. But in this picture, I think it's pretty clear. That's me. And so it doesn't take much to turn your head, to just try to enter a different door and walk into a room a different way and think about who's there and what they do. There was a movie that came out recently about a woman who's a hero of the space program, calculated the trajectories of the Mercury and Gemini and Apollo astronauts and some shuttle. And in the movie's called Hidden Figures. This is Katherine Johnson. John Glenn said he would not climb into that space capsule until that woman, the smart one, calculated the trajectories for the computers, which were at the time very new. Now, the movie's called Hidden Figures, But here she is in a sea of white guys, in a sea of white shirts and skinny black ties. She's a woman of color, and she's wearing a dress of color. There is nothing hidden about Katherine Johnson, and yet we did not see her. Many of us just did not see her. And that is your job here today, is to realize that at the tables you're at the tables you're going to be at the conversations you're going to have at coffee, you are going to be in groups where either you think you know people, and I just guarantee you that there's things about people you cannot possibly know. I mean, I stick out in this picture here with President Obama and my space shuttle, the space shuttle crew that visited us, and my space station crew. It's very visually, I stick out very visually. I'd like to think that, in some ways, even though we all went to space together, there are things about me and the way that I work that I don't think that all these guys knew, and there are things about them that I discovered up on orbit, and I had more to discover. And it's that theory of discovering, of really using the circumstances that you have to say, how can I make a difference today? A very quick story about something where I feel like I had some initiative and I'd like to think it made a difference is that CNN and Volvo covered the eclipse on the web together. Volvo sponsored the CNN page for the day of the eclipse, knowing that a lot of people were going to watch it. And of course, it's about cars for them. And at the same time, it's also very much about women in STEM, in science, technology, engineering, math. And I would throw the A in there for STEAM, some art as well. And they hired 4 of us across the country to be your shepherds of the eclipse. And I was going to watch in Missouri. And I said, well, that sounds really great. You'd see me watching the eclipse. But how can we make some more ripples from this? How can we make a way that more people see themselves in this moment? And so I asked them if I could invite a troop of Girl Scouts. And I didn't actually necessarily need Girl Scouts. I just really wanted girls and boys there with me so that girls and boys all over the world could watch and see themselves in this picture instead of just me. And you also see my husband and my son up there on the right. And so we watched the eclipse together. It was a moment that we can't undo. I mean, this was something incredibly special that we did together, and it's hard to describe how it feels to see something like that. And when you do it, even with a stranger, there's something that binds you together. And I think you will feel that about your time today at ZWC and your time after, is that you are now making connections with each other. Sometimes they happen naturally. Sometimes you have to work at it. And I'm telling you that our job is imperative, and that we have to work at it. And you have to dig down and realize that your perspective that you bring is important. And in order to bring it to this wonderful, amazing place that we live, you're going to have to be brave, some of you, or I'd say actually all of you. And you're going to have to be open. And probably you're going to have to be both. I mean, it takes a little bravery to go up to somebody at coffee who you don't know and just say, what do you do? This is what I do. As if what you do and what you think about is important, because it is. If you're here and you care, then sharing what you have is important. And it's more important than being, kind of just holding on to yourself and realizing, well, maybe they don't really need me. You can't afford that. Now, I'm going to say one more thing before we end, and that is just really about that kind of spirit of a team and that spirit of perspective. I think it's easy to think in terms of disciplines, in terms of this kind of waste management, this kind of technology, this food waste. We have all the subjects represented here at the ZWC, and at the same time, I think it's really important to think about the art of communication, about people, about family. And so that, when I came home, this is my family, my husband, my son. My husband is a glass artist, and I say this not to sort of advertise, but because it's been really fascinating for me, the perspective that he brings. And of course, we're in this picture because he would like to have gone on the rocket. But he explores in his own way. And so I just want to make sure you don't leave those voices out, because in the work that you do today, I mean, he makes these objects called planets. They go from big, like you just saw, to really tiny. And they're planets that exist in his imagination, but often it is the artists and the communicators that are going to help us share our message so that we can gather the people that we need to actually make things work. And so it really takes so many people with so many perspectives. And I think it's good to just advertise the fact that really every one of us brings something, and we have a curiosity inside us, an urge to discover that is really magical and essential. I think that every one of you in this room, every one of you on a team, someone on your team feels this way about something. And your job is to discover what it is. I mean, whether you want to be exploring for Mars, because we're going, and we will be going. We need these technologies that you're developing for zero waste here on the planet. They are exactly applicable to what we're looking for space, for exploration. And on the other side of that, what we're doing for exploration is exactly applicable to what you are looking for here. And I will tell you that NASA and the other space programs are trying to make sure that innovative people like you, your ideas, are being brought into the sometimes more government-constrained programs like ours so that we can really understand your ideas. But this is my perspective. This is my friend Tracy. She took this beautiful picture, and to me, it's the epitome of a human and their relationship with the Earth. But it's what I saw when I looked back. Is I was on a space station, and it was really clear to me that if I didn't do the work that needed to be done, our crew, if one of us didn't do it, or we didn't help each other do it, it wasn't going to be done. And that's a luxury that we have. To be one of 6, it's really clear. There's only 6 of you up there. It's really clear that no one else is going to do it. But when I look back, I see a different crew. I see the crew of Spaceship Earth. And you are the crew of Spaceship Earth. Good luck, and thank you for having me.